I learned a lot about anger. And it was just through all my healing that I really decided to dive into emotions because I found the common thing within like just talking to people or being positive or raising kids or anything. It comes down to your emotional responses, how you respond to things, how you respond to
Mm.
people, what actions you take when you are emotional. Not to say that anger is bad because anger is actually a normal emotion. The thing that most people have a problem with and that I had an issue with was how I was responding because I was angry. I didn't know what emotional regulation was even at the time. And I was just like, we just have to stop and cry. I experienced a lot of blind rage. And a lot of parents don't realize that they have blind rage until I explain it. And then a lot of parents after that are like, oh, maybe I have blind rage. But blind rage could include completely like blacking out. So there were times for me where I would get so angry. I don't even remember. I didn't remember anything because I was just so angry because anger was in the driver's seat. If you get angry and you don't really recall what you said, or you just feel like you're just doing whatever to like almost harm the person, just not necessarily like physically or anything, but you're like trying to push them away. You could be insulting them or just whatever, like that can be blind rage. Is one thing that is really good to do is when you make a mistake and you hurt somebody is to do something nice for them.
Hello and welcome to the Mama Culture. This is a place for you to be supported, inspired, and resourced on your unique journey through motherhood. I'm your host, Corey Zorns, a fellow mama, here to bring you information and wisdom on parenting, wellness, personal growth, and everything in between so you can thrive as a modern mama. So grab your favorite warm drink, settle in, and get ready for relatable, honest, and empowering conversations about the most important job in the world. This is the Mama Culture. Hello, Crystal. Round 2. I'm so excited. We are both here. We both have some good stories. We're both dealing with tantrums and toddlerhood. So I'm so excited to jump in because I'm curious about your tantrums and I'd love to share about my toddlerhood. And this is our round 2 of recording our podcast together. The first one that we recorded was so good, so much juicy information. I was so excited to share it, but we had a little issue with our audio. So we are doing it again, which I'm even more excited to film now because we have become online besties. We have connected through Instagram and now just cheer each other on and support each other. And that's been so fun. And I just think it's amazing that you can meet someone over Instagram, that you can connect with someone and that you can truly care what they're doing, what they're creating, that you can collaborate together. Like me and you have some big plans of what we want to create and do. So I hope everyone listening knows that, like, just listening to a podcast or connecting with someone on Instagram or messaging someone, like, message us. We love connecting. And yeah, I just love that you and I are connected and I can't wait to meet you in person. And I can't wait for this episode. It's going to be so freaking good. For everyone listening, I'm so excited for you to meet Crystal. She is a gem of a human and I already love her. She is a parenting coach specializing in emotional regulation, cycle breaking, and creating positive connections with our children. She's creating massive impact with so many people. She's created Surviving to Thriving, which is resources, support, classes, a membership for parents so they can continue to learn, grow, and thrive. And your own childhood and your own experiences has catapulted into this lifelong mission of yours. So I'm so excited to hear your story
Oh,
again
yeah.
because your story is just beyond powerful and so meaningful for people to hear. And then today on this podcast, in this conversation, we will be diving into self awareness as parents. We'll be diving into generational change, emotional regulation, positive discipline, and a really important one, anger, something that we all experience. And we just want to have a conversation about it, bring it to light because there's so much there. So let's dive in. I'm so excited. I'm like, should we
Goodness.
start with the toddlers and the tantrums or should we start with your story? Where
Oh,
should we
Corey,
begin?
we have so much to talk about.
Let's start with a little update just
Yeah.
on life. So you have
Yeah.
two boys, right?
Yes, I have 2 boys. Absolutely adore them. They are just my life. I love them. Love them to death. So they both recently had birthdays. So now they're 4 and 6 years old. So yeah, new phases of life. They're loving things. Emotions are everywhere too, currently at the moment. Still love them, even though.
Tell us about some of the tantrums that are happening lately.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, so my oldest son does have ADHD. My youngest does not. And so the way they experience their emotions is very different. So a child who's neurodivergent, it's kind of running a marathon, trying to teach them how to just regulate their emotions. And for my youngest, it's kind of like a 5K. That's what it feels like to me. That's the best way that I can explain it, because a marathon, it takes a lot more consistency, a lot more hard work. You have a lot more structure. You have to be like very set on your goal to even get anywhere. Whereas a child who isn't, you still have to have those things, but it's like in a shorter spurts. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been crazy. We've been really diving into helping my oldest with a lot of tools that he can use. And yeah, my brain's a little bit spacey. I'll be honest. If my brain's a little bit spacey today, it's because it's just like those times where your kids are just on it for the day, right? They're just like very emotional about every single thing. That's how it's been for the past like week. So if I'm kind of spacing, it's just, it's just a break for my brain, I guess.
Yep, I hear you. You can listen to the last podcast called Mom Brain. There is so much in there. And also, just as moms, it's like having some compassion and a little break for us, because sometimes we are a little spacey. I haven't been sleeping for like 2-3 weeks now. River is in a big developmental phase, and I'm really seeing the toddlerhood come out. He's 20 months now, and I feel like every episode I'm jumping on, like, I haven't slept. Finally, last night, I'm like, oh, I feel like I got a good night of sleep. Woke up, got ready for the podcast, and 2 hours into my day, I'm like, okay, wait, I'm pretty sleepy. So I've just been rolling with the punches. Like, October came, and I'm like, you know what? This is a month of slowness and rest. It's Libra season.
Yes.
Just like slowly moving through this year, and that's okay. There's different seasons, different phases where I'm like grinding and pushing and launching mama culture, and then other seasons where I'm like, I can just chill right now. I could just be a mom, take some naps, make some food, and have total mom brain. So River's 20 months, and we're really experiencing his individuality and like him wanting to be separate and wanting to show his own needs and desires. A lot of that is a no, just to anything. Are you hungry? No. You want to go swimming? No. Do you want apples or oranges? No. It's like we could try anything. I could ask a question. I could give you options. I think it's just fun for him to say no. And I'm like, to me, it's just funny. I'm like, okay, I hear you. Did you pee? No. Okay, we're going to try anyways.
It's so fun during that stage, because it's like, it's hard, but it's fun, because it's like they finally realize that they're a person and that they can make choices. That's what's so hard. And so then they're like, well, I can make any choice I want, when in reality, as parents, that's not true, but they don't know that yet. So we have to help them understand that there's boundaries and limits. But oh my gosh.
I love watching it and seeing it. It's really fun. It's really cute. Sometimes it can be frustrating. And at the same time, as he becomes more of himself, he also has a connection to me in a new way, where he's actually becoming more attached, because I think he's really realizing, like, now when I leave, how long am I leaving for? When am I coming back? If it's me, him, and dad, sometimes he's frustrated that it's not just me and him, or just him and dad. It's like the other day he bit me and I have like a bruise from it. And like he has not been biting. And I'm like staying calm and, trying to talk him through this and asking
my
him how
youngest
he's feeling.
is a biter too. It took a little bit. He doesn't do it anymore. But I was like, where does this come from?
Yep, full on bruise.
Not a chew toy. No. What's going on here?
Yep. And then he's been wanting to hug other children, and sometimes they don't want the hug. And I'm trying to intercept it, but sometimes they're like on the ground because he's forcing the hug. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to let you do that. You can hug mama. We're going to step away. So it's just been so
River
interesting.
Sounds like my youngest.
Yeah.
Totally stoked. I'm like, if they met, they'd be like best friends.
I've been like talking to other girlfriends and other moms, like, okay, well, what did you do during the toddler phase? What did you do when this happened? Because sometimes as a mom, you can feel anxious. Oh my God, my kid just tackled another kid to the ground trying to hug them. And yeah, it's just a lot of self-compassion for ourselves. And like, we're doing our best and trying our best. And I'm constantly learning new tools and new ways to set boundaries. And it's not perfect. So yeah.
Parenthood isn't perfect.
It's not.
It's not. I make mistakes all the time. Like whenever I'm talking to people, coaching people or anything, like one of the things I share is a lot of my mistakes.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like when you're online and like for me, like I'm a parenting coach and I'll share like, oh, how to do this, how to do this. There's
Yeah.
just like automatically people think I'm perfect at it.
Oh my god, I
And
bet.
I am not. So I like always share like, hey, so here's my mistakes for the day and I'll
Yes.
list them out and like it's
People are thinking,
okay.
"You know all the tools, you should be perfect. Why are you doing it wrong?" Like, you know all the answers. So, yeah, love you sharing your mistakes.
Yeah,
Mm,
I've made some mistakes within
yeah.
this past few week with these tantrums. I'm like, man, what
Yep.
was up with that? you
Mm.
know?
Make mistakes, make amends, and honestly, like, if you didn't make the mistakes, you wouldn't have teaching content. So within your
It's
mistakes,
true.
within our own hardships is what we share with the world. Okay,
Yeah.
let's dive into your childhood story.
hmm
I like, wow, your story is so deep, so impactful. It's such a big part of your journey of who you are now as a parent and why you do what you do. And wow, there's just like some shocking moments in your story where I'm like, this is wild. So
Yeah.
let's dive into your story. It's a really powerful one.
I feel like that's such a good way to like describe it. Is it's just
Mhm.
wild. There's so much to it.
Mm,
Obviously, there's so much more than I can just say in this podcast. And I'm like,
yeah.
maybe one day I'll write a book about it. I like it
Mm.
because there's just so much to it. But yeah, I'm going to try and get to the important pieces in it and narrow it. My life from the very beginning hit a rough start. It was really difficult and really hard. So, when I was 3 months old, my mom was killed in a car accident. My brother was in that back seat of that car. He was 3 years old. I also had 2-year-old sister. So, imagine that 3 month old, 2-year old, 3-year old. Absolutely insane. My mom was said to have passed away on impact. My brother in the back seat life flighted to the hospital where he stayed a very, very long time. We were told, or my dad was told, that he wouldn't make it through the night or anything and to just basically come and say his goodbyes. And he's still alive. Just want to throw that out there. If you can get him to talk, he's the funniest person you will ever meet in your life. But he's also very reserved. But that was in the first 3 months of my life. A little while after, my dad met a woman who I will say before I dive into this, I think it's really important that I let every single person who's listening know that first off, change is real. It's real no matter how bad things are. If you have a desire to change, you can. And my mom is not like this at all. I actually very respect her. I very much respect her for who she is, the change that she's gone through, how far she's come. I know our relationship probably it's not like perfect, right? But it is so good at the same time. But as I share my story, why I want to say that is because who I'm going to describe is going to be pretty much a different person than who she is, like completely different. If you met my mom right now, you would be in shock with like how things were. You just wouldn't connect them, you know. You wouldn't connect the two different people to being the same people. That's how much changes. So I do want to preface that just because a lot of the things that I am going to say are hard. And yeah. So basically my dad remarried to a woman. And at the time, all throughout my childhood, me and my brother and my sister were basically subject to all kinds of abuse and neglect, mainly at the hands of my mom. And it's hard to dive into that subject because there was just so much that happened. Anger, for one, was extremely present throughout my childhood. And it was one of the things that led to abuse was just the lack of control with anger. And so for those of you who don't know, anger is the number one emotion that actually does lead to abuse. So you have to think of like any situations like that. Usually like 90% of the time people are angry in some way or another when they exhibit those abusive behaviors. And that's just how it was for me. I was very depressed. I think by age 7 or 8, I didn't know what the word was, but I remember basically, like crying in a room and just praying to God to take my life because I just couldn't do it anymore. Things were just so bad. It was like emotionally damaging, psychologically, just like awful, and again, damaging and abusive. And there was some physical in there as well. And I just remember sitting down and praying and being like, please let me go live with my mom. Like, I'm not needed here. And it's really hard to explain to anybody how to say, like, as a child, you felt less than nothing. As a child, we would sit in our room. I remember my sister and I, we were sitting in our room one time, just like talking about it. And it was weird because now that I think about it, we were all like nonchalant. We were like really chill. And we're like, yeah, we're like, we're not meant for anything. We're not worth anything. We're like less than trash. And then we would talk what was less than trash. The dirt on the ground, the dirt that we walk on, or just things like that. And it was just, it's surreal thinking back to that moment. I don't think that's something that I shared with you before, but I do remember that. And it's hard. And as I grew up, there were a lot of other issues that I personally experienced from everything that I was going through. I had a really hard time with relationships because I didn't know what a good relationship was. I had no idea what that was. The only relationships that I had were toxic. They were bad. It was just awful. I was treated terrible, and so were my siblings, and we didn't know how to treat each other good either. So it was just it was a complete mess. So I didn't have too many good friends, or if I did have friends, I didn't keep them for long because I just didn't know how. I myself got really angry all the time, like extremely angry. And that's probably because of the example that I had as well. And again, the depression was just so strong. The anxiety was, and I was scared all the time. It was like when people say you go through abuse, you're living in survival mode. That's really what it was. Every decision that I made was based off of, okay, how do I not make my mom mad? How do I avoid this? Like little things like that. So, for example, there was growing up, I wasn't allowed to go into the kitchen. I wasn't allowed to grab food whenever I wanted. And I remember having to make different decisions to either sneak food out of the kitchen or to just go hungry, whatever it was. And I would have to plan how to get food when I was hungry. Now, she still fed us. I will say that there were nights where I still remember not being able to eat dinner as like a punishment. So I don't want anybody to think that we were like purposely being starved of everything, but it was just like an option that we didn't have. We had to sit down and eat breakfast at this time, no snacks. Lunch, this time, no snacks. We didn't choose anything. We didn't choose our food. And it was hard. And so, like, even decisions like that of, oh, hey, I'm hungry, I had to really think about. I had to really think about, okay, do I actually need this food? Can I go hungry for tonight? Oh, she didn't feed me tonight. Do I need to try and sneak and get food? Or do I need to just wait and wait till like school or something? And I guess that's just a little story in there. But the thing is when I was old enough after high school to move out of my parents' house, and I did, and I got married and everything. When I moved out of my parents' house, I moved in with my husband and his family. I ended up pretty much getting disowned over a religious thing, pretty much, which of all things. And I told him, like, I can't stay here. I can't be here anymore. And my husband, who he was my boyfriend at the time,
How old were you guys?
let me think. Oh, since we were just out of high school, so he's actually younger than I am. So I believe
Mm,
we were like 19 and 18.
cool.
So we were little babies.
Yeah, I love that.
So we got married young and everything. But I remember telling him, like, I don't know where to go. And he was like, oh, just come to my house. Like, you can just stay with me. And I was like, no. I was like, that you can't do that. And he's like, yeah, it's okay. Don't you have to ask your parents? No, they're going to be fine with it. And I was just like in shock because never before have I seen such kindness ever, ever. And never before have I seen a relationship between a child and their parents, or I guess I shouldn't call him a child, between the, like, just, well, he is a child, the child and the parent. And just where it was just like, oh, yeah, like he knows that they're going to be okay with it. That was so foreign to me. And so my husband's from Mexico too. And we went to his house and his parents didn't even speak English.
No, I didn't
And
know
I
that from the
didn't,
last story.
no, they didn't speak any English. And I didn't speak any Spanish. I had decided to take like Japanese in high school. I don't know why, but that's what I decided to. But yeah, anyway, we got to his house and he was talking to them and he was like, hey, like she can't live with her parents anymore. She's getting kicked out. Can she live here? And before they even like were like, oh, well, why? They're like, yes, which I understood yes in Spanish. I didn't understand C. So I was like, what? And then everything else after that, he had told me later. And he was just like, yeah, they said it was fine. You can sleep here. You can have this room. I can sleep on the couch. It doesn't matter. You can stay here as long as you want. We have food. We have all this stuff. And they were like, not only did they invite me into their home, but they like provided for me, like everything, which was complete strangers. We can't even speak the same thing. I don't even think, honestly, at the time they liked me. But they're like, that didn't determine whether or not they were going to help somebody. And yeah, I stayed there and eventually we got engaged and married. But it was in there that I felt, yes, I get to kind of escape what I was dealing with throughout my entire childhood. But it was also in there that I realized, like, just the thought constantly, man, I am screwed up. I am
Mm,
so broken. That was the exact phrasing I use all the time because I would see their family interact with each other. And they were just like, they would still fight. They would still get in arguments and things, but it was nothing compared to what I had grown up with. And it was almost strange to me that they would have an argument and then 5 minutes later, they were like best buds. It didn't
mm,
make sense to me. I never understood that. And even going back to the food thing, I remember my sister in law, she was like 4, 5, she was little. And she went to go get food from the fridge. And remember, I wasn't allowed to do that. And I remember her going, and there was a time like her friends came with her and they started opening the fridge. And that was like one of the main points that I realized that I'm like, holy cow, I really do have some things that I need to work on. I have some things that I need to heal because I remember automatically in that moment just going into my like fight or flight response. As she was just opening a fridge, the little girl, just because she was hungry, her friends were hungry, they wanted something to eat. And I was thinking to myself, like, oh, what do I do if her parents come over and start yelling at her? What happens if she gets hurt or anything? Like, should I step in or do I like, should I just go hide? Because I wasn't sure, oh, should I like stand up for this? Or am I going to hurt too? Should I just hide? Should I pretend it's not happening? And like, I remember my mother in law like came out and like my heart just dropped. I had like just a huge knot in my stomach. I was
mm,
terrified because a 4 or 5-year-old went to the fridge to open it up and get something to eat. That's insane. That's insane. And I remember just like my heart was pounding and she just asked her, she's like, are you hungry? And she's like, yeah. She's like, what do you want? And she pointed to it and she got her friend some stuff and that was it. Most people don't see that as a beautiful moment, but for me, that was like how beautiful of a relationship was that for her to
mm,
be able to go to the fridge because she was hungry
mm,
to get food for her mom to see and be like, hey, are you hungry? Of course you can have this. Your friends are hungry? Of course they can have this. And it was like there that I started really learning the difference and diving into things. But the more I dived in, I also felt like the more broken I was. And so after we had moved out and we had our kids, I made the decision that I thought was very smart to basically ignore everything that had ever happened to me. Because if I ignored it, and I didn't have to pay attention to it. Like I was healed. Thank you, Lord. I was all good. But that didn't work and it actually made things worse. So my anger when I first became a mom was absolutely out of control. And like it was so bad that I remember like every relationship, still going back to my childhood, was a struggle, even with my spouse. And there were so many times where we were like threatening divorce on each other and we're like,
mm,
we're going to divorce you or don't treat me like that. And we're just yelling and screaming. And I would yell at my like 1 year old, or even before he was one, I was yelling at him because I was just so upset because he wouldn't stop crying. Right. I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know what emotional regulation was even at the time. And I was just like, we just have to stop him crying. We have to stop these tantrums, whatever they were as he got older. And there was just one point where I just finally came to terms with the fact that everything needed to change. And I think this had to have happened when I was pregnant with my firstborn, because I remember sitting in the car. So I'm thinking about the timeline. Okay. So when I was pregnant with my son, I remember taking my dad aside, making him make time for me because he was just so busy with all of his other stuff. And sitting him down and talking about a lot of the abuse that had happened to me. Just him and I had my husband in the time in the back of the car because I was scared of how my dad was going to respond. And I didn't think he was going to listen to me because for the majority of the time, he wouldn't listen to me. And he sat there and listened to everything that I had told him about the abuse. And I remember at the end of that conversation saying, hey, if this doesn't change, like, I just want you to know we're not going to be coming over. We're not going to see you. This is my child, right? When he's born, he goes first. And later on, so this was after my son was born, I made the decision to come out about all the abuse, which was one huge roller coaster. And I just posted on Facebook. There was the Me Too movement. I blocked my entire family from it, and they found out about it in like less than a minute. So I guess just they got sent to them and stuff, and I got calls. I remember my dad saying, hey, I think you should take this down. Don't talk about what's going on or anything like this. And I just didn't. The reason I didn't is because I knew that if I talked about it, if I put it in the open, then that would give the opportunity for people to change. Because at this point, I wasn't sure. I had my oldest who was just recently born. I wasn't sure if I wanted my family in his life because they hadn't changed to that point. And the least I could do was give him a chance, like give him a real chance. And so that's how I gave the chance. And I remember people would come and apologize to me because there were other perpetrators in that abuse as well. And they would like profusely apologize to me, just crying and sobbing. And I know obviously I'm lucky. I'm lucky that there's people like that who are coming back and being like, I'm so sorry, because for the majority, I don't feel like that happens, especially when the abuse or neglect is just so intense. And my mom and my dad stopped talking for months. And I thought I was going to cause a divorce and everything. And it was mayhem. It was wild. It really was. But after a little bit, I finally got enough courage to talk to my mom, because up till this point, I had just called everything out and didn't talk to her because honestly, I wasn't that brave. I just wasn't. And I finally realized, like, if I really wanted to change, then I needed to do something. And so I messaged her. And basically, the message said something along the lines of, hey, we need your help. We want to get better. All of us, all my siblings, I had step siblings and a half brother as well. I'm like, all of us want to get better. All of us want to do better. All of us want to come together as a family. All of us want to heal. But the thing is we can't heal without you. We need you to be with us if we want to make things better. And immediately, like, she actually answered that text message right off the bat, which I was like, when I saw that she had messaged me back, I was terrified because I didn't know what she was going to say. But when I opened it up, she's like, okay, I'm in. She didn't second guess it. She wasn't like, well, I didn't do A, B, and C. This is your fault. She didn't gaslight or anything. She just said, okay, I'm in. And she ended up setting up a family therapy session for all of us to sit in a room and talk about what happened. And it was a very, very special moment to be able to come together, because that was the first time that we ever really came together. When I think I had my son, I was probably around 20 at that time by the time I actually had him. And so I was around 20. That was the first time that we ever came together. And we only needed one session. We only needed that one time to talk about it and just say what's on our mind, what was going on. And during that time, the one thing that I remember my mom saying as she was just apologizing profusely was, if I knew how to do better, I would have done better. And that has always, always stuck to me, because how true is that? If I knew better, I would have done better. As you get older, you learn from your mistakes, right? And then you're like, oh, if I knew better, or because I know better, I'm not going to do this, right? But she didn't know. And after that whole thing, there was like this huge learning curve that I personally went on in this, not, well, yes, learning curve, but just a healing journey that I had to go on, where I had to dive into my childhood and start fixing things, because I couldn't hide it anymore. That wasn't working. It was making everything worse. And so I had to take my childhood piece by piece by piece by piece and just heal over and over and over. And I had to learn a lot. I started studying so much, reading all kinds of books just to feel like a normal person. Because when you grow up with childhood trauma, you don't feel like you're a normal person, and you don't feel like you can be compared to a normal person, because there was so much that you missed that you should have had when you were a kid. And so as an adult, I had to find the things that I needed and just heal and just get better. And I learned a lot about anger. And it was just through all my healing that I really decided to dive into emotions, because I found the common thing within, like, just talking to people or being positive or raising kids or anything. It comes down to your emotional responses, how you respond to things, how you respond to people, what actions you take when you are emotional. And over a lot of time, and a lot of, honestly, it was a lot of time, a lot of trial, I would say like 90% error, because I didn't find anybody who could just sit down and teach me, like, hey, this is like your emotions, this is how you handle it. I couldn't find anybody to teach me that in a good way. Because when I looked on the internet, I don't know if you've done this before, but if you look on the internet about how to not be angry, what they're going to tell you is to take some deep breaths and try to stay calm. That doesn't work. I don't know like any parent that has worked for right off of the bat. Now, because I practiced a lot with my emotions, that actually does kind of work for me now, but it's because I have all this other stuff,
Yep.
right? But that is not a good entry point to, like, if
You
you're
just
an
tell them
angry
to calm
parent.
down. That's it. That
I
helps the
know.
anger,
And
especially
you're
within
good.
partnership. You just tell them
Yeah.
calm down and then everything's better.
I know. I was mad at the internet when I read that. I was like, really? You
They're
want me,
like,
like,
"You
I was
take a
about to
deep
find
breath.
my
You calm down."
I know.
Google.
It's like, you can't even take a deep breath. You don't even know what you're talking about. And it was just, yeah. But I had, after I was like, or during my healing journey, and after I really dived into emotional regulation, I went to a lot of different business ventures just because I was like, oh, I want to do something with my life. None of it was meaningful to me because I knew what I wanted to do. When I was like a kid, there was a moment where I was sitting in my room. There was a lot of moments, special moments that I had sitting in my room, even though I was scared and it was dark and I couldn't go anywhere. There was a moment where I sat there and I was crying nonstop. I just couldn't stop crying because of everything that was happening, because I was so hurt. And I remember saying, if I ever get out of here, because I didn't think I was going to live past my childhood, honestly. I was like, if I ever get out of here, I am going to help kids, because kids are powerless. We can't do anything. It's the adults who run the show. So I remember vowing to myself as a kid saying, hey, I'm going to help. I'm going to help where I can. And so when I started going on all these business ventures, I had that thought in my mind, but I couldn't bring myself to be brave enough to be vulnerable. In my mind, I was like, I can be vulnerable. Like, if you were on the street, you were a random person that wanted me to tell you my life story, I would tell you every single detail. But I couldn't do it to a large group of people. And there was just a moment, and it was a year ago, almost a year ago, where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to make this a thing. I'm not going to make this a thing, but I'm just going to share with parents about how to be like better parents. Yeah, that sounds great, because I had been studying so much about emotions, about parenthood, about raising kids. about meltdowns and tantrums, about connecting and relationships and being positive, spirituality, like all kinds of things. I was like, you know what? Of all things, I am in a position to share what I know because I have been studying for like 5, 6 years. I can do that. And so I started my Instagram account, Surviving to Thriving One, and I chose that name. I was sitting there and I'm like, it's not that kind of a name, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's how it feels. And I love the name now, but I remember when I was first became a mom because I was still dealing with a lot of the trauma that I had when I entered parenthood. I felt like I was surviving every single day. But because I had learned and grown so much, I felt like I was really just thriving in it. I was doing awesome. I'm still thriving. I might make mistakes, but I know I'm still thriving. I started that account and it's almost been a year. In November 14th, so next month, it's been a year. And I think I have
Yeah.
177,000 followers on Instagram where I'm teaching people about this.
Mm.
And about, I think it was like 5 or 6 months in, I had gotten like 100,000. And I was like, I can really do this. I can really make
Mm.
a difference. And I was like, I'm going to make my young self proud right now. I'm going to do
Mm.
what I wanted to do, which is help to make a difference. Because if I can even teach people about emotions, right? If I can teach the parents about emotions, then in all reality, that can help to end a lot of abuse that happens.
Mm.
Not saying that all of us who are uncontrolled with emotions are abusive. So I'm not saying that whatsoever. But what it can do is it can better your relationship with your kids. It can make them stronger. It can make you feel happier. It can make your kids feel happier. Right. And it's just surreal thinking about that.
Mm.
And I'm not necessarily diving into save every child, but what I am doing is I'm helping a lot of parents who have had trauma experiences in their childhood, helping them break that cycle. I'm helping them to just start a completely new phase of life with their own kids where their kids don't even know what that kind of thing is, which is as a somebody who grew up in trauma, that's what you want, right? You want to grow up, and if you want to have kids and you have kids, you want it to be a beautiful thing where they just don't understand what you've gone through. So I've just had all this opportunity to really help parents, to coach parents. And it's just been amazing to see the results and the change and the difference. I get messages from people all the time, like every single person that messaged me, and it's something good. I don't think I've ever shared this, but I always screenshot it because I just read that message because their message means so much to me. And it reminds me, like, hey, I am making a difference here. I'm like helping my inner child is just through the roof right now
Mm.
because she's able to make this impact that she wanted when she was a kid. I like as an adult now, I'm like, this is what I'm meant to do. I am
Mm.
good at, not only am I good at this, but this is something that I'm like, I need to do this.
Yeah.
This is like, if I'm not going to do it, nobody's going to do this.
Yeah.
This is me. I'm going to be
Mm.
out there teaching people.
I love your story so much. There's, like, so many little pieces that my mom brain is
Oh
trying
my
to keep
gosh.
up with. There's so many things I'm like, "Wow, there's just so much there." But yeah, I truly
Yeah.
believe, like, your soul came in asking for this experience to be on this mission. Like, you are on such a mission, and you're making your little girl so proud, and, like, you wouldn't be doing what you do and impacting people in the way that you are without the experiences that you went through. Our children are helpless. Our 0 to
Yeah.
3-year-olds were building their brains and their nervous systems. And so, of course, you experience the anger and the dysregulation as a parent. Even though, like, you became aware, it's like your subconscious, your nervous system was programmed as a 0 to 3-year-old, and to have that happen with the car accident and your mother and abuse, like, it's so wild. It's so wild and so unreal, and
Yeah.
yeah, it just makes me so emotional, and what you're doing now is so impactful and, like, really healing. It's like healing your generational line and healing so many other families. And even in creating the mama culture, I was like, I want to heal mamas. I want to give mamas information. But I think both of us are also on a big mission to heal the children, because we know
Oh,
if
yeah.
parents start to heal, if we start to become self-aware and to see our own traumas, whether they're little traumas or big traumas like you experienced, if we can be with that and start to heal it, our children are so deeply impacted. They're the first ones to be impacted,
Yes.
and then we don't pass this on. So yeah, I'm just
Yes.
grateful for your story and for the work that you do, and I think it's really inspiring, and you are just really touching so many families. And wow, what a story. Yeah, it just it
It's
makes
a
me kinda
lot.
speechless. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot in there.
Mhm.
So, touching on your story, yeah, so the self-awareness and the breaking cycles, I truly believe that when we heal the generations behind us and in front of us, like, we heal both ways. Because, like, your mom that abused you, it's okay, well, what was she going through when she was a child? What did
Exactly.
she see and experience? And then we just keep passing on these generational cycles. And so, how can we become self-aware and start to break these cycles? So, you said when you became a mom, you were, like, showing like, yelling at a one-year-old, which is like, of course,
Yeah.
that's exactly what you're showing. So, what were your
Yes.
biggest steps in breaking the cycles? Like, it sounded like you became self-aware. You sat with and you're like, "This is what's going on." What were those first steps for you in breaking the cycle?
Yeah. So the point that and this is somewhat unfortunate, but the point that I actually realized that I was the problem and not
Mm,
everybody else was
mm,
because I had to look at my relationships. So my husband and I at the time, we were both very angry, but I couldn't keep blaming him for being angry and I could only control what I could, right? So I took my responsibility. I stopped focusing on him. I took my responsibility. The other thing is that there was a point where my son was just scared of me and
mm,
he didn't have to tell me. I know what that looks like.
mm,
I remember that. I remember that look. And even if he was so little, I knew how he was like, I knew he was responding in certain ways because he was scared, because I did that same thing. And that hit home for me. That just got me right there. And so that was something that I realized that, hold on, like, this isn't okay. But for me to actually be more mindful of everything, especially my emotions, because it was just anger. Anger's like the gateway. And not to say that anger is bad, because anger is actually a normal emotion. The thing that most people have a problem with and that I had an issue with was how I was responding because I was angry. Because you can be angry and not punch holes in the wall, right?
mm,
I have kicked holes in my door before because I've been so upset. I don't know if anybody else has done that, but I did. And right, not everybody goes out
mm,
of their way to damage their home and like kick a hole in the wall, right? That's so like, oh, okay, right? So it was just all dependent on how you responded. But when one of the major things that I started doing to become more mindful was actually writing in a journal. And I have this whole thing on this, but basically when you take the time to write in your journal every day, it almost forces you to be mindful because you have to go
mm,
back. You have to go back and think about what you did, what you said. For me at the time, it was mostly mistakes. I'm going to be honest because I was not a good parent. I didn't have examples of good parents, right? And it was just unfortunate, but fixed that fairly quickly. But I didn't start out being a good parent. And so most of my time in my journal was just all the mistakes that I made constantly. And through that process and how I like go through this process of journal writing, I started to create change and tried to be like, okay, so this was my main mistake for the day. So tomorrow, that's what I'm going to work on, or
mm.
I'm going to work on this for the next week or the next month. Sometimes I literally just needed to be aware of something and then I could fix it.
Yep.
Other times, oh, other times I had to like really work on it. Like something as simple as my son like spilling his water on the ground. When I was a kid, we would be like yelled at like
Mm,
profusely and like for a very, very long time. And we were shamed for it. And it could be an accident. We were made to feel guilty and all kinds of things. We would end up crying because it was like we just spilled our water and we just felt
uh,
like a disaster, right? And so that was something that because I was raised with that, I was taught how to respond that way. Not saying that like when you grow up, like you're like consciously aware of like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to react
mhm,
to this. It's just a subconscious thing, right? So I kind of reacted the same way. That took me months. That took me
mhm.
months to figure out how to respond. I know it's so simple, but that's just the reality
Wow.
sometimes.
Yep.
And yeah, journal writing was just the
Mm,
gateway for me to actually be aware of what was going on because I
mm,
forced myself to be aware
yep.
of what was going on.
2 things that you said. One, I really love, and I've really implemented this in my own life, is you said, I couldn't be the victim. Like I had to see where I was angry, where I was causing the
Yes.
problem. And it's really easy, especially in like our relationships. I do this all the time. I'm like, he did this, he's mean, this and that. And then I'm like, it doesn't fix a single thing. It's like, where am
Mhm.
I not showing up in alignment? What is my responsibility? Because the outside world, yes, they might have done something wrong, but we can't change them. We can only focus on ourselves, change ourselves, and then have those conversations. And then maybe they're open to change. So
Yeah,
I love that because
exactly.
the second we can let go of just wanting to blame the whole outside world is the first step to healing because we cannot change, we cannot heal ourselves if we're just still in blame mode. And blame mode can be a
Mhm.
total part of the process. I have done a lot of blaming, but it's only when I come back to myself and say, okay, what am I doing here? Or maybe it wasn't my fault, but like, where do I need to set a boundary or how can I show up differently? And then
Yeah.
the other thing is, yeah, several things on there as parents, we're literally just acting out as what we learned, and that's the good and the
Yes.
not so good. It's like I
Uh-huh.
notice all these really sweet things I do for my family that I'm like, "Oh my god, I am completely my mother," packing the little snacks and little note like, the little things that I do, I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm a complete
Yeah.
version of my mother." And then also the things where I'm, like, a little short or wanna change a little bit, I'm like, "Oh, I also saw that in childhood." And so knowing that they were doing the best with what they knew. And if we can have the self awareness and see these things, that's the only chance to break the cycle. And, some things we love it and we want to hold on to it. And some things we're like, oh, that doesn't feel good for us. And I love what you said about journaling because it's really easy to make a mistake, to do something wrong, to snap, to yell and then to feel shame, but then to just let it go and then it happens again. And it's like this ever going cycle of like not liking what you're doing as a parent, feeling shame about it, but not having any tools. So I feel like journaling is a tool that you sat with and is okay, I'm gonna look at it. I'm gonna be self-aware and then I'm gonna see what steps I need to take. And maybe I make the same mistake 10 more times, 50 more times, but you're actually sitting with it with a tool. So yeah,
Mhm.
I love these tools. I've used journaling as well, and I've also gotten, like, therapy and coaching, and there's so
Yes.
many tools. Sometimes I need outside support, sometimes I need to sit with myself, but having these tools to work with your self-awareness because it's really easy to be aware, but then to keep doing the pattern and the habit and to not change.
Mhm.
So I love your exercise of journaling and sitting with it and, like, talking to yourself and making next steps. "Okay, tomorrow I'm gonna try to do
Yes.
this differently when he spills the water."
Yes, I tell so many people to do it. I'm like,
Yeah.
just trust me, even if you're
Mm.
not a writer, okay? Even if you have to wake up a little bit early, even if it's
Mhm.
like a short little paragraph, that's one of the main things I recommend to parents for like emotional regulation overall. I'm like, start
Mhm.
journaling. Just trust
Mhm.
me. And I have a whole
Yeah.
process for them to do it. Just, oh my gosh,
Maybe
it's
we could do
amazing.
a whole we'll do a little whole journaling prompt for people that we can give to people. One journaling
Yes.
thing I used to do, and I still do sometimes when I'm really angry, is an FU letter. And an FU letter is
I love
writing
it.
an FU letter
Yeah.
to the person that you are annoyed at. I am so mad at you for doing this, and I'm so angry and blah blah blah. Literally just getting it all out. Never needs to be read to them. It's not what's really there.
Yeah.
But then after I get out all of that, put my emotions on paper, put all the blame on paper, the next thing I write about is where I'm actually mad at myself, where I actually didn't show up in the way I wanted or didn't set the boundary or maybe need some more self-care and I'm just really burnt out. So first I write an FU
Yeah.
letter and then I really write what I'm mad at myself for because a lot of it does come back to ourselves and things that we wanted differently or things that we could have showed up differently. And then I kind of just tear the whole thing up and throw it away or burn
Yeah.
it or whatever it is. But it just helps me process and get out emotion. So I love a
Oh,
good FU
yeah.
letter. I've
Yeah.
never
No,
read anyone
that's
an
like,
FU letter. They would be
I
just
hope
not
not.
great for someone to see, but it does
Yeah.
help me process it. And then sometimes I've gone back and read my FU letters and I'm like, wow, I was angry and that wasn't even their fault. Like, man, I was really in victimhood and I was
Yeah.
really pissed and I just had to be in that process. And that being part of the process is okay. But it's
Yeah.
okay. But it's better when we have tools to work through it and we're not just like shouting and yelling
Yes.
at the world.
And that's like amazing because it's like with the thing is with emotions is if you don't like get out what you're really feeling, it's really hard for you to actually understand where you did wrong. And so
Totally.
I like always tell people, this is why I tell people venting is great if you vent with purpose. Venting just to vent is going to make things worse.
Yep.
Like your FU letter, like you said, is you don't stop at the venting, right? You don't stop there. You keep going and you're like, okay, what's really going on here? What really happened? Right. But if you just stopped at the venting, you would continue your day like just like being in just a bad mood, just about the situation. Because there's a lot of people that I know who will vent just to vent. And I'm like, okay, so that's great if you take it a step.
Yeah. What's the next step in it? Because just venting and just blaming won't get you anywhere. Another letter that I was taught a long time ago in some practice and exercises was a resentment inventory. So first you write all the things you resent about another person, a situation. Like I resent this and that for doing this and that. And then after you're done with all that and you get it all out, you write down next what you resent yourself for. I resent myself because I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't take care of myself in this moment. I didn't talk kindly when I wanted to express something. And then it just helps you process both sides instead of just being in the victimhood. So that's another one.
Yeah.
And
I
then
love that.
I want to talk about anger next. Another one that we just did a little while ago on the last retreat I was on with Megan. She's on the first episode of the podcast, Megan Lambert. She's an amazing teaches about feminine polarity, desire, masculine, feminine dynamics, relationships, sexuality. But one thing we did on the retreat was it's called swamping, where you play this music and you literally hit pillow. You don't even have to be angry about something at the time, but it's just a process to work through the anger that we're always pushing down and trying to hide and trying not to show. So we did in a whole room of women and played this loud music and just let our anger out. And then after that, we played another song and really moved through grief and what grief felt like and just felt that in our bodies. And then we played the last song and just moved through our sensuality and just practice moving different emotions through our body and letting it be okay. Because as a society, we are taught that anger is really bad and we should push it down. And I think the more that we push it down and don't look at it, the more that it comes out in ways that you don't want it to. So that's what I want to talk about. I love what you said. You said anger is the number one emotion that leads to abuse. We all have anger. And you also said anger is not bad. And I think that is a really important statement for people to know. Anger is not bad. So I want to talk about anger. I want to talk about, more about what your anger looked like, how you handled it, and how we can start to come into right relationship and connection with our anger so we can start to move through it, start to redirect it and channel it in a way that is healthy. So let's dive into anger.
Okay, so first off, I have so much that I can say on this. Okay, so I'm going to try and answer your questions, but if I miss them, just re-ask me them.
Cool.
Because I have just so much. So I don't know if you actually want to know how I reacted to my anger just because it was so bad. But
I want a real life reenactment.
Oh my gosh, that would scare everybody here. They'd be like, oh no, is she back? Just kidding. No, but my anger, it was just, I experienced a lot of blind rage. And a lot of parents don't realize that they have blind rage until I explain it. And then a lot of parents after that are like, oh, maybe I have blind rage. But blind rage could include completely like blacking out. So there were times for me where I would get so angry, I don't even remember. I didn't remember anything because I was just so angry because anger was in the driver's seat. My emotions were just so heightened that I didn't have control, right? Logical thinking went out the window. You tried to talk to me logically, it wasn't happening. We're on an emotional thing right now, okay? And my emotion is anger. There were times where I used to say just awful things with the intention just to push people away and be like, no, you deserve to be punished because you did this. And I'm not even just talking about my kids. Okay. I'm also just referring to my husband too. And sorry, I shouldn't be laughing about it, but to me, it's crazy because it's so different. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy that we were like that. I mentioned before that there were times where I got so angry that I had like kicked a hole in the wall. I remember being so angry. We lived in a manufactured home at the time. And I don't even know what I was angry about. I was just so angry. And I kicked a hole in like the trailer skirting. And then we got really upset afterwards because to replace that, it was going to cost us like $60. And we had to replace it. And we're like, we don't have $60 on this right now. Or I think it was actually like 120 because I got 2 different sheets. Anyway, it was just a ridiculous thing. And then, you know, that would happen quite often. And yeah, it was like any other emotion that I experienced. So if I was frustrated or sad or let down, I was angry, straight
Mm.
up angry. And anger is a secondary emotion. So that means when you are angry, there's other emotions that go into it, right? But like when I say I was sad, I would be angry. Like I would be crying because I was so sad. And I would be yelling at you because you just came
Mm.
to comfort me. Cause I'm like, I'm not okay with that at the time. Okay. So my anger, like, hopefully that gives an idea. I have so many stories in regards to that, but it would just know it was out of control. So if you get angry and you don't really recall what you said, or you just feel like you're just doing whatever to like almost harm the person, like just not necessarily like physically or anything, but you're like trying to push them away. You could be insulting them or just whatever. Like that can be blind rage, is what my point is. And then if you're just angry at them and you feel like you're aware of what's going on, but you're just saying all kinds of things that you would never say, you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do, things like that, then that's uncontrolled anger.
Mm.
And anger is normal. So, one of the best things about anger is that anger actually teaches us that something is wrong, right? For example, this happened this past week. My son came back from school and he was telling me how there were some boys that were pushing him. They were just pushing him around. They were yelling at him. He described some other things. I'm like, okay, this is the beginning to a bullying situation. Automatically, I got angry, okay, because
Mm.
that tells me that something's wrong. There was something wrong with that situation. As he was talking to me, I was getting angry. Now, I don't get angry how I used to, right? But, I had to ask him a lot of questions. I'd be like, this is not okay. This is not right. We have to, like, did you tell them to stop? No. Okay, that's your first thing to do is you have to use your
Mm.
voice. Did you talk to the teacher? Okay, you forgot. Well, you need to talk to your teacher. Let's talk to her. And it was completely different, right? So when I talk about anger to a lot of parents, that's the number one thing that I tell them to realize about their anger. First off, anger isn't the problem. How you are responding to your anger, that that can be the problem. Your anger
Mm.
is built into you. Okay,
Mm.
genetically. It's inside of you. There's nothing you can do. Just like how you get happy for situations, right? That's normal. Just how you get sad for situations, right? That's normal. You get
Yeah.
frustrated during situations. You get let down. Those are all normal. Well, it's normal for you to be angry during situations. What matters
Yeah.
is how you respond to your anger. So that to really be okay with being angry, I think it actually comes down to two different things. Is one, understanding that anger is just telling you that something needs to change. And as a
Mm.
parent, that could actually even be yourself, right? If my son, going back to my son spilling the cup, right, water, whatever it was on the floor, I was angry. Well, it wasn't necessarily that he had to change, it was that I had to change. I had to
Mm.
change one of my triggers.
Yep.
Something was not okay. Because when I actually looked at it logically, there's like accidents happen,
Yeah.
like, just clean it up. It's easy, it's simple, I don't really need to be angry, but my anger actually led me to realizing that I needed to change, right? Something needs to change. So that's one of the first things. The second thing I would say is to actually be okay with anger is learning how to respond in a healthy way, because you can never be okay with anger if you're continually yelling or shaming your kids because you're angry, right? If you're punishing your kids because you're angry, you can't really be okay with anger. You're always going to see anger as something that is bad. But that's not true. It's how you're responding to it. You're upset with how you're responding to your anger, not that you're
Mm.
angry. So that would be like coming into just being okay with it. And I just think really understanding again that it is okay. Like me saying it, I hope that parents here are like, oh, okay, that's
Mm.
different, but, like,
Yeah.
it's good. I hope that opens a gateway for some of the listeners to be like, "Okay, I am allowed to be angry."
And I
Okay.
think everyone has different levels of anger. Like some are like
Oh,
really
yeah.
explosive and really loud and really in your face. So it's, oh yeah, I'm angry. But some of us might have low key anger. Like I think I'm more of a low key
That's
anger
true.
where I know it's there, but it's a little more quiet. So just realizing that like all of us have it, we all express it differently and
Yes.
it is okay and normalizing it. And like you said, it's not the anger, it's how we react to it. So
Mhm.
are we reacting to it in a way that's hurting other people, or are we sitting with it and processing it and seeing the gifts behind it? Because
Exactly.
anger can have gifts. Something's not right here. Something needs to change. And so having anger be as accepted as all the other emotions and sitting with it and working with it. Because the same thing, like if we can't be with our anger, how are our little ones going to be with their anger?
Exactly.
And if we're not with our anger, we still have it, but we're just pushing it down so far that it's probably unconsciously coming out in ways that we're not even aware of. So
Yes.
letting
It
our anger come
builds
to
up.
light, yeah, I totally, it just builds up and then explodes. So
Mhm.
yeah, normalizing it just like any other emotion and being with it and being okay with it and then working with it. What are your
Yes.
top tools for working with anger? So, parents that are new to working with anger, or parents that like maybe didn't see that they have some anger and it's coming out in subtle ways or maybe
Mhm.
smaller ways, what are your biggest tips in how parents can start to rechannel this and work with this and be with it?
Okay, so do you want tips just for specifically the parents or like tools that parents can use for their kids?
I think both would be great.
Okay. Okay. So one of the biggest tools that I already said was journal writing. And I
Mm,
explained why is because it forces you to be more mindful and aware of what you're doing. And honestly, sometimes it hurts because you realize how wrong you were, right? But that's what
mm,
creates change, right? You might even get angry because you got angry, but what's that telling you? Something's got to change, right? So journal writing is one of the biggest things. And I do want to say this. So, this is something that I'll be covering more in my Emotionally Thriving membership that's coming up. So, the internet doesn't tell you this. Okay. So, I'm going to be everybody's parenting coach, their friendly parenting coach. You have to have an overall regulation tool for in the moment regulation tools to work,
mm,
especially if you are struggling, whether it's feeling overwhelmed or stressed or angry or frustrated all the time, whatever it is, you have to have an overall regulation tool, something that you're doing consistently to help
mm,
level your emotions. Okay. Journal writing is
mm,
like a daily thing, right? And there's some
mm,
other ones that we'll go over it throughout that membership as well. But that's again, that is always the one that I lead with and the one that I recommend the most, which is why I'm telling everybody because that works so well. In the moment ones, whether it's for yourself or for your kids, one of the best ways you can think about it is a disruption. I call it like to disrupt the anger. Okay. We
mm,
don't want to ignore our emotions because ignoring our emotions cause buildup. We have this emotional cup. If we're pouring into that cup, right? Our all of our emotions, and we just try and ignore it and look away. Guess what? We're still filling up that cup, and eventually it's going to overflow. It's going to start coming out. So what I say is it's a disruption where we just stop. So some examples that you can do is
mm,
like changing scenery. For example, you're
mm,
beginning to feel angry. You go outside, take your kids outside. Sometimes changing the environment that you're in makes it better, right? Putting on music, I'll tell a lot of parents to like, well, this is one of my favorite ones is to just be silly. Put on some random music and just start dancing. Like just,
mm.
and I mean like mid anger. Like you're going to have to fight yourself mentally to do something silly. You're going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. And then you're going to have to fight with yourself and be like, no, you're going to do it anyway. Right. And you're going to grab out your phone, put on whatever music that's silly and just start dancing. Imagine doing that when you're angry at your kids. Okay. Or imagine doing that when your kids are angry and you put that on. What is it doing? It disrupts them because everybody's
Mm,
pausing. They're either laughing with you, they're thinking you're crazy. You probably feel weird, right? It's a disruption. It completely stops what's going on. And when you're actually calm and you're in a state to handle things, right, then you can handle things. You can figure out why you were angry, what was going on, right? So we're just disrupting it. Even for kids and adults, you can also use things like sensory toys. Sensory toys are becoming a lot more well known, I think. And I've
mm,
noticed that a lot of schools, for example, are including sensory toys as well, like little stretchy toys, squishies, poppets, all kinds of things. Those things are
mm,
great too because it disrupts it, right? You're distracted. All of a sudden, you're not like standing there being angry, ready to yell or whatever.
yep.
You're trying to pop all the bubbles on the poppet as fast as you can. You're trying to do this color first or this slide. You're
Yeah.
using one finger, two fingers, three fingers, whatever it
Mm,
is, and it disrupts it. Let's see what else. For kids, something that I love using for kids is something that they can build. So taking out things like magnetiles or blocks or Legos Whenever my kids are angry, especially my oldest, this works really well with my neurodivergent son. So if anybody else has neurodivergent kids who are very emotional, because when they get emotional, it's just more intense because they just take in everything in just a stronger way, pretty much.
Mm.
So when they feel anger, it's magnified. And one of my favorite ones is when I'm asking my son if he's angry, I'm like, hey, let's take a pause. Do you want to play with magnet tiles? And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm like, okay, let's just go sit in your room together and I'll take the magnet tiles with me and I play with them instead. Because here's the thing is even though they don't want it, when you're listening to them and you're just like, you're playing with the magnet tiles, first, it helps you to stay more calm as a parent because you're putting your focus on really
Mm.
playing with these magnet tiles. And it's for
Yeah.
different purposes, right? For you to just focus your energy on that. So that way your child can express whatever they're going through, right? But then you're also going to notice, and if you're a parent, if you really are focused on something, your kids want it. It doesn't
Yep.
matter what it
So
is,
true.
they want it. And so my son will always come over to me after he's, oh, I hate this. I don't like this. And then he sees me playing. And even sometimes I'll be like, man, I can't figure out how to get this to stay. Right. I'll like mumble to myself about how I can't do something. And then he'll literally, it disrupts him. He just stops. He's like, can I help? Sure,
Wow.
bud.
Love that.
And we just play for a while and we just keep playing and playing. We disrupt the anger. We're not going back to it right away, right? As soon as he's in the magnet tiles, 80 to 90% of the time, I don't go right into, okay, let's talk about why you're
Yep.
angry. Let's solve this. We just play because
Yeah.
they just need time to go
Mm.
back down. Kids, especially when they're angry, right? They go into the emotional side of their brain. They're not
Yep.
able to think logically, which is why when you're
Mm.
like, hey, let's solve your problem, they scream and cry and yell because they
Totally.
can't think like that. They just, their
Yeah.
brain's not going to let them. And so we'll be on the magnet tiles. And once he's really calm, once it seems like everything's over, I'll be like, hey, let's talk about that real quick. Those are some big emotions, huh? Yeah, I was really angry. Okay, what about? And we have conversation and we fix it. We
Yeah.
put boundaries where we need to put boundaries,
Mm.
right? Because there are boundaries of what we can and can't do when we're angry and upset. But building things,
Mm.
that's my favorite, especially if you have neurodivergent kids. Again, it's a little bit harder with neurodivergent kids. It takes a little bit more time, but I could do a whole other thing on that, honestly. I really
I
could.
love having different tools for us as parents, for us as moms, like things that
Mhm.
we can do by ourselves, but then also things that we can do with our little ones, with our family, because
Yes.
both are necessary. Sometimes we're in the anger and we need to take a moment for ourselves and process and emotionally regulate before we come back to the family. And sometimes the entire family needs to co-regulate together. So we need something to do together as a
Yes.
family. Maybe you can't take a minute. Maybe it's just you and your little one, and there is no taking a minute. So it's like, how can you guys regulate together? And I also really love what you said, where there's in the moment regulation, these disruptors. And those are great to have, the in the moment regulators. But if you are not, like you said, practicing a daily emotional regulation, if you are not constantly having an ongoing practice, those disruptors in the moment are going to be a lot harder.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
your ongoing emotional practice is going to bring up your baseline for the capacity you have with your anger and with your emotions. And I have a lot of practices like journaling and meditation and somatic release. I love somatic release practices where I'm like moving and making sounds or tapping my body and just things that I'm doing daily on the
Yes.
everyday to always work with my nervous system and my emotions. And I love the other ones you said, like getting outside, doing something different, because we're just stuck in a part of our brain when we're in these emotions and it's looping and looping and it's telling the same story. And then we think our body and our nervous systems thinks it's happening over and over again, even though it's already past what happened. So I love what you said about getting outside or changing our attention or changing our children's attention. It gets you out of the part of your brain that it's stuck in into a new environment or into a new object. And then it's easy to
Yes.
just get out of it for a moment and then let things settle and start to co regulate and then talk about it. Hey, what's
Yeah.
there? What are you feeling? What do we need to put in place?
Yes.
Because,
And
yeah,
that's so important. That's so sorry. I mean, I
yeah,
just got you off,
no.
but that is so important because a lot of parents, when they hear like, hey, we're going to really teach our kids how to be emotionally stable, one of those is you let them experience their emotions. A
Yeah.
lot of parents, their main issue is like, well, how do we let them experience it if they're hitting and kicking? That's not okay. And the thing is, okay, so there's more to it than that, right? They can experience their emotions. We allow them to experience their emotions. But once we disrupt it, then we take it a step further. We solve the problem and we set boundaries.
Yeah.
And if there's any kind of consequences, for example, if my kids are like hurting, if one of them hurts the other, right? One of the things is we have them talk to each other. We have it solve out. And sometimes we even let them pick their own thing. But a lot of times we're like, you know what? One thing that is really good to do is when you make a mistake and you hurt somebody is to do something nice for them.
Mm.
Like, so we do a lot of positive things like that. And so
Mm.
then we'll be like, okay, what's something really good that we can do for your brother? Because I think that
Mm.
really hurt. And then
Mm.
sometimes they'll talk to each other and be like, I want to do something nice for you. What can I do? Or they're like, oh, I know what to do. Like my older, like sometimes he has this moment of like, I
Oh.
got this, mom. And it's just
I
something
love the
simple like
problem
that.
solving with them. I love them getting to problem solve the
Oh,
repair
yeah.
because, after
Yes.
we mess up, after we make mistakes, after we have big emotions and explode on someone, it's okay. It's going to happen. And then how do we repair? So, how do we learn that as adults? And then how do we teach our children this repair and the working through it? And I think another thing with anger and big emotions, like mostly we're the ones that are so uncomfortable with it. And children
Hmm.
aren't. Children are amazing. Like you see them, they're
That is
happy and then
such a
they're
good
kicking and
point.
screaming and then they're okay the next moment. They're so good at processing emotions and oftentimes we're uncomfortable that we can't be
Mhm.
with it. And that's also part of the daily regulation practices for our own nervous systems, for our own capacity so we can be with our children's emotions. We can be with their anger and it's okay. It's a gift. There's
Yeah.
just something that needs to be shown there.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's so funny because I was actually working on a post today about, okay, what are some benefits like of being able to emotionally regulate? And one of them was that you just feel okay with it. You feel
Yeah.
okay with like your anger, your frustration, your anxiety. If
Mm,
you have an anxious moment, you feel okay with being sad or happy,
yeah.
excited because you can regulate and you know that it's just okay. It's part of
And
things.
healthy.
Yes, and it's
Yeah.
easier to make amends too when you can
Mhm.
emotionally regulate and
Yeah.
not even if you can, but like as you're learning, it's just you're like, okay, if I mess up, that's okay because my emotions are normal. That's not the problem.
Mhm.
How I like what I did, that was the problem. I can
Yeah.
fix that, right? And it's just so
So
much easier.
if you're listening and it's hard to emotionally regulate, like that is also normal because as children, most of us were not taught to emotionally regulate. Like most of our parents didn't have the tools and the information that we're now learning. And so now that we know better, we get to do better. And now that we understand emotional regulation and self-regulation and co-regulation and that anger is okay, but how can we be with it? Now we get to learn the tools and do better. And then we get to teach our children. And it's really beautiful. Like even when my little toddler is upset or angry or mad because I'm leaving the house and he really wanted to be with me. And sometimes whoever's staying with him might try to distract him or get him out of it. And I'm like, it's okay for him to be in
Yes.
his anger and sadness and frustration. And can you, it's mostly the adult, I'm like, can you be in that with him for a moment and just say, hey, I see you're really angry that mom's leaving. I see you're really frustrated. Do you want to, and then making some suggestions, but us also being with our children's emotions. When we're emotionally regulated and we're doing these practices, it's much easier to be with our emotions, everyone else's
Yes.
emotions. And it's okay. They're going to come, they're going to go. We got this.
Yes, and the thing is the emotional cup, it's like as a parent, not only are you filling up that emotional cup with your emotions, but the emotions of your kids. Cuz I
Totally.
don't know about you, but there are times like recently we've just been in these massive meltdowns for the past week. And like even for me like after these 7 days, I'm like, okay, I'm done, right?
I'm checked
But
out.
yeah, a little bit and it's okay like I have been carrying my emotions, my kids have been having meltdown city over here. And my cup is being filled because as the adult, I'm helping them take care of their emotions. So
Yep.
my cup is being filled with their emotions and my
Yeah.
emotions, right? And
Yeah.
even like the emotions of your spouse sometimes too, right?
Mhm.
Especially like when your spouse is angry, sometimes you get angry too, right? Or if
Totally.
they're sad, you get sad. If they're
Yeah.
feeling let down, you might be like, oh man, and you might
Yeah.
feel down too, right? So when you become a parent, I feel like it's not just even your emotions, it's everybody's emotions.
100%. I so believe that. And there's a part of me, my brain that worked through that. Like, is it codependent to take on like your partner's emotions? It's normal because like you're a team
Yes.
unit. And of course you're going to feel the effect of everyone in your household, especially your children, because we are
Mhm.
their regulators. But of course, if our partners are feeling something, like we're going to feel the impact of that. And so having practices to drain our emotional cup, to empty it out, to release it, having self-care practices, communicating with our partner, okay, right now I am at like a 20 out of 100. I have very little capacity in me. Can you take on this next one? And
Yes.
just having these strategies for your team, like your family is your team. What are the strategies that you and your partner can do? When do you need to take time to empty your cup and to do some releasing or do some self care or go to a. When I was actually angry as a younger girl, I was doing some therapy and found out some stuff I was really angry about.
Mhm.
I signed up for boxing class. And since then, I have a love for
I love that.
boxing, but I just would go and box and hit a bag and like, get my anger out and just finding these things that worked for me to empty my cup of emotions. And I still do these
Yes.
practices. Like I might get in a fight with my partner and I'm so mad at him, like, babe, I'm just mad. I want to hit something. Will you just help me hold a pillow? And I'm like so angry at him, but he just like supports me through it. And I'm like, okay, I love you. It's whatever. And here's the gifts and the knowledge in it. So yeah.
Yeah. Mix and
Okay.
match.
I'm like me and you could just talk on forever.
Oh my gosh, you really
Um,
could.
People can join us in the future. We have some exciting things that we're going to share and create and do that we're just manifesting. But before we talk about that, I want to ask you one last question. If you could write anything on a billboard for all moms to see, what would that be?
Okay, I actually do know the answer to this. And
Okay.
I don't even know if this was the same answer I gave you the first time we recorded or not. But if I could just make sure that everybody sees this and understands it, it would be that change doesn't choose people, people choose to change. I
Mm.
don't care where your life was. Okay. I came from a childhood trauma. I was set up for failure. I was not set up to succeed. I wasn't set up to have a family, to be married, to be in love, to have friends. I was set up to fail. I was set up for really bad outcomes in life. And even again, the story with my mom, the powerful change. You choose to change. Change doesn't come your way and be like, hey, so and so, you ready? Like, we're going. That's usually not how it works, right? And it didn't come to me, knock on my door, and say, hey, Crystal, okay, we're going to change from your trauma. You no longer have a trauma like experience affecting your life. You no longer have anger. No, I chose that. If you
Yeah.
don't choose it, it's not going to come for you. So that would be the phrase that I would put. Change doesn't choose people, people choose to change.
And that's powerful for us because then we get to make the choice. It's our freedom, it's our free will to change and to adapt and to heal generations before us and after us. And that gives us power. We don't have to sit back and wait for change to come. It's like we can take the power, we can decide to take those steps, and it impacts everyone around us.
Yes.
Okay. Cool. We try to keep this one nice and short, and we just have so much to say. I just
We
want to
do.
ask if there's anything else you want to share with everyone. I'm going to share your Instagram, Surviving to Thriving One. There's just so many great tips on
Awesome.
there. I love going through your content. And
Oh,
I want to
thank
tell
you.
everyone that we would love to plan a retreat in America. So, me and my partner have a retreat company called Revamp Retreats, and we've been leading retreats around the world for the past 6, 7 years, transformational retreats and yoga retreats, but I really want to move this into mama retreats because I know it's so needed. And when I talked to Crystal, I'm like, I love you. You have so much great stuff to share. So we'd love to bring a retreat somewhere in the States, somewhere on the West Coast. So if that excites you, please message me because I would love to know that as we start the planning. But Crystal, is there anything else that you want to
Yes.
share with everyone listening?
Yeah, so I guess where to find me, or I said Instagram, Surviving to Thriving One. We will be opening up a website. I was doing classes and I just knew I had to drop what I was doing, and we made a huge upgrade. Super
Mm.
excited. So it's a lot at once. We're doing a membership. It's going to launch on November 14th, which is the anniversary of when I first started Instagram. So it'll open up, though, will be a membership podcast and a community there specifically to help parents with emotional regulation. And then I will also be starting a different podcast that is Surviving to Thriving Parenthood that I'm really excited about, where I'm going to have lots of guest speakers talk about their journeys from surviving to thriving parenthood and just different aspects of parenting where we feel like we're surviving and just how do we get to the other side of thriving. So that's basically all the new stuff. I'm really excited for it, honestly, for the membership and for the podcast. So yeah. And that will also be at survivingtothrivingparenthood.com. But there's going to be a lot of updates on my Instagram if people follow me there.
Amazing. Yes, please follow her and let us know if you're interested in a retreat. And Crystal, thank you so much for coming on. I love what you do, what you share. I feel like we will always stay connected and be close friends. And it's just so
Yes.
great to have other mamas on this journey with similar missions and similar ways of doing things. And we can lean on and have a talk with when we mess up and make mistakes. And it just means
Yes.
everything for mamas to have village and community and other mamas to lean on. So thank you.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me.
Mm.
I was so excited. I'm sad that the first one we're redoing, but at the same time, I was like, yes, I get to talk to Corey again.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Mama, thank you for tuning in. I am sending you so much support and love on your journey through motherhood. Remember, you are not alone in this beautiful, wild, and sometimes challenging journey of motherhood. This is your village. Please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this with anyone else that you think would benefit. Take care, Mama, and I will see you next week. Thank you for being part of the Mama culture.